Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Raymond Yeung.
And I'm Edna Tse. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Chief Executive expresses concern about fate of ATV ahead of visit to Beijing.
Police say less than $5 million from missing security van cash turned in so far.
More violent protests in U.S. after black man gunned down by police in Missouri.
Chief Executive Raymond Yeung says the government is closely monitoring the situation at ATV, which still hasn't paid its employees their November wages.
Yeung was speaking on his way to Beijing, where he will discuss political reform with mainland officials. Court-appointed accountants from Deloitte China are trying to solve the crisis at ATV by looking for a white knight, an investor willing to put much-needed funds into the company. They warned yesterday of a worst-case scenario, where if the company is unable to pay staff their due wages and the news department stops operating, ATV could lose its free-to-air license. That would lead to the collapse of the station, as no investor would be willing to step in. The decision on whether to renew ATV's license when it expires at the end of next year is already overdue, and it's now up to Chief Executive Raymond Yeung and his cabinet to decide. He was asked about it before he left for Beijing this morning. We have been closely monitoring the license renewal issue. If there are any problems, we will handle it with the relevant mechanism, legislation and policy, Yeung replied. Yeung said the Communications Authority has a certain role to play, but did not confirm reports that it has already recommended the license should not be renewed. He also gave an assurance the Labor Department will do its part to protect the rights of employees regarding the pay issue. The chief executive, who is on his annual duty visit to the capital, said the focus of his trip will be to discuss Hong Kong's constitutional development with Beijing leaders. He once again urged lawmakers to approve the final political reform package when it's presented to LegCo. While the government has the majority support of the pro-establishment camp, their pan-democratic colleagues hold just enough seats to veto the proposal, which need 2/3 approval from the 70 legislators. On a separate issue, Yeung noted the overwhelming response for a new batch of 2,160 homes under the home ownership scheme, which was revived after 11 years. More than 38,000 forms were handed out on Tuesday alone, even though applications only start next week. Yeung said he's not surprised with the strong response for subsidized housing, as many have been priced out of a home in the private market. He admitted it will be a challenging task to keep up the supply of HOS flats, particularly with the search for spare land. But he's confident that his government can solve Hong Kong's housing shortage step by step. Less than $5 million has been returned from the $15 million that went missing after it fell off the back of an armored van yesterday.
Police say anyone keeping the money they picked up is breaking the law. Arthur Urquiola reports.
Plainclothes police were out along Gloucester Road this afternoon, a day after some $15 million was snapped up by motorists and passers-by after it fell off the back of an armored vehicle. The officers questioned people in nearby buildings, hoping to recover some of the missing cash. Among those questioned were staff at a nearby car park, who said security camera footage wasn't taken away. After dozens made a grab for the cash as it fluttered across the road, reality set in today. Police warned that anyone who helped themselves to the bundles of $500 notes were committing a crime. Millions of dollars were returned throughout the day by dozens of people who had a change of heart. Bank of China, which hired G4S to transport the money, said today that the security firm was investigating the matter and had taken steps to prevent something like this from happening again. It added that G4S had apologized and will be liable for any cash that isn't recovered. The firm said it was carrying out an internal probe and that a problem was found with the left door of the van. It said there were 3 guards in the van, but in line with its security procedures, they were not in the area where the money is kept. The van was carrying some $525 million cash when 2 boxes, each containing $17.5 million, fell out onto the road. About $20 million was recovered yesterday. It's another embarrassing mistake for the British security firm, which has been plagued by scandals over the past few years. Arthur Ricchiola, ATV News.
A dozen people from Occupy movement offshoots were arrested overnight during violent pro-democracy protests in Mongkok.
And today, pop singers joined the pro-democracy campaign by singing Christmas carols laced with political messages.
Christmas is in the air. While Hong Kongers had to put up with damp and gloomy conditions on Christmas Day, two pop singers tried to brighten up people's spirits by singing carols in busy Causeway Bay. Denise Ho and Anthony Wong, as well as other members of the pro-democracy group Hong Kong Shield, said they were reminding the public not to forget the spirit of the so-called umbrella movement during the festive season. Some supporters turned up with yellow umbrellas. The performance was briefly interrupted when security guards from a nearby shopping center complained to the police. The troupe also performed in Mongkok and Admiralty, two main bases for the Occupy sit-ins, which blocked traffic for 2.5 months. The government should be serving the people rather than the people obeying instructions from the government, Ho insisted. They then made their way to Chinese University in Sha Tin to join hundreds who braved the rain to attend a pro-democracy concert. The leaders of scholarism and the Federation of Students were among them. The venue is also where students kicked off their strike in September, ahead of the Occupy protests. But splinter groups of the movement held less peaceful protests last night. Hundreds gathered on the streets of Mongkok after 9 p.m. and claimed to be doing Christmas shopping. They heckled minibus drivers belonging to the group that filed an injunction to end the road blockades. Things turned violent after midnight when they stormed roads and tried to block traffic. Police used batons and pepper spray to control the mob. 12 protesters aged between 13 and 43 were arrested for allegedly assaulting officers and criminal damage.
Children from broken cross-border families are calling on the government to increase the number of one-way permits.
In other local news, protesters are demanding the release of mainland dissident Liu Xiaobo. Alison Chan reports.
While many people across the city spent the day celebrating Christmas, some pro-democracy activists decided to hold a protest. About 20 members of the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements of China and the Professional Teachers Union marched from Western Police Station to the liaison office in Saiwan this afternoon. They demanded the release of dissident and Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo, who has been in jail for 5 years for subversion. The protesters also want the central government to release Liu's wife Liu Xia, who has been put under house arrest since 2010. In another protest led by members of the Society for Community Organization, children from single-parent cross-border families marched from the Statue Square to Government House. They accused the government of ignoring their calls to grant one-way permits to mainland mothers whose children have been abandoned by their Hong Kong fathers. The group urged the government to increase the permits quotas so cross-border families can reunite as soon as possible. There was a surprise visit at the hostel for the elderly this afternoon. Volunteers from concerned groups against elderly abuse played games with the residents and gave them Chinese lucky bags. This 86-year-old woman, who's been living in the home for 15 years, said she wouldn't be celebrating if the volunteers didn't come. The group wants to raise awareness about social problems such as the wealth gap. Alison Chan, ATV News.
Mainland media reports say dangerous levels of antibiotics have been discovered in major rivers.
What's alarming authorities most is that the polluted rivers are also sources of drinking water. According to a CCTV report, water samples collected from major rivers, including the Huangpu and Yangtze, contained several types of antibiotics. The most severe contamination was in the Guangzhou section of the Pearl River, where levels were above European safety standards. Drinking water is sourced from the affected rivers. Investigators also say water samples taken from Nanjing contain antibiotics. Reporters investigating the contamination looked into water discharged from several antibiotics factories. They found that polluted water pumped from the Shandong Lukang Pharmaceutical Company contained a high concentration of antibiotics, up to 10,000 times acceptable levels. The plant has also been hiring people to transport and tip wastewater into nearby rivers to save sewage discharge fees. This led to untreated sewage being dumped into rivers. Under mainland environmental laws, companies must properly treat sewage before it leaves the factory, and judging by Lukang's actions, it has broken the rules. Experts say humans will become resistant to antibiotics if they consume the polluted water over a long period. Overseas, protests have erupted in the U.S. state of Missouri again after a white policeman shot dead a young black man.
But authorities insist the incident is in no way reminiscent of the police killing of a black teen in nearby Ferguson. Joyce Wu reports.
Tension between police and the black community in the U.S. seems to be reaching boiling point again. Demonstrators in St. Louis, Missouri clashed with law enforcers after a policeman shot dead a black teenager close to where another black youth was killed in summer, sparking nationwide protests. More than 100 people gathered at the scene in Berkeley, St. Louis after the incident and threw bricks and fireworks at police. 4 people were arrested. Police said the black teen who was fatally shot, 18-year-old Antonio Martin, pointed a gun at police officers at a petrol station.
The individual that is going to have the firearm, he backed away to the east just for a few steps, turned back around. The officer started engaging him in conversation again, and then the individual produced a pistol with his arm straight out, pointing at the officer from kind of across the hood of the police car. At that point, the officer produced his service weapon and fired what we think at this point is 3 shots.
Police released a surveillance video from the gas station, edited to end just before the shooting. The officer who fired the fatal shot had been given a body camera, but was not wearing it at the time of the shooting. The dashboard camera on his car was also off for unknown reasons.
We do not believe that there was any shots fired from the suspect. The suspect was armed with a 9mm high point.
Berkeley is just 3 kilometers from Ferguson, where 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot dead by a white officer in August. For weeks, there have been widespread protests against what many see as police brutality. But authorities were quick to warn against people drawing comparisons between the 2 incidents.
I had the opportunity last evening to review the video of the incident. And what I saw in this incident is not what people portray. This is not a policeman in the city of Berkeley, half-cocked, going out, and as we say, you know, Black Lives Matter. This was not the case. This is, you couldn't even compare this with Ferguson or the Gardner case in New York. Everybody don't die the same. Some people die because the policeman initiated. Some other people die, wait a minute, hold up. Some people die because they initiated. And at this point, our review indicates that the police did not initiate this, like Ferguson.
Others agree that the Berkeley police are justified.
I understand the hurt and the pain, and I'm angry too. But I have to tell the truth. In this situation, there is a young man who illegally possessed a gun, and that is against state law.
He had a weapon. He knew his choices. It was just, you take your choices, and that's what you get.
The officer, who has not been identified, has been put on administrative leave. Joyce Wu, ATV News.
Still to come on ATV's main news. Pope preaches peace while Barack Obama justifies war in annual Christmas messages.
Boxer Amir Khan visits Pakistan to help rebuild school attacked by Taliban.